And so those have been like, what's cool about our guys, I thought we got better and better. It's one of the few teams I've been around that every week our guys kept getting better and better and better. And so far, really what we're challenging the guys right now is take from the scars and the mistakes we've learned, let's grow from those as we move forward. Does that make sense?
Speaking of that, like getting better now that I've had time to digest it, when you go back and you see the Peach Bowl film, I mean, the defense just kept chugging away, but you're kind of, I know as being a coach and being tough on it, but you're great at that, like how that last performance we saw.
There's a lot of really, really great stuff, and there's some really bad stuff. It's a football game, put it like that. And it's the type of game that, as we saw one or two plays differently, so we really challenged the guys on defense because I know a couple guys really they all took it hard, but really, it felt like they had let the team down with some things, and it's like, listen, we're going to grow and learn from it. We're not going to point fingers. We're not going to blame. You know what I mean? Like, it was a team loss, and I'll say it sucked. It still sucks, but you've also got to be able to move forward. There was probably a week or two, and we hit the road recruiting that I'm wallowing in it. That every plane flight I'm on, I'm watching it and thinking about it. But to grow, you got to be able to move forward. You know what I mean? And that's what they've done a pretty good job. Is the teams I've been around that can take a loss like that and use it as motivation and use those lessons to help build you and grow you, you can do some really special things. And, when I was at North Dakota State in 2010, we lost in the quarters, got knocked out by actually Bo Baldwin's Eastern Washington team. And coulda, woulda, shoulda, had an opportunity to win the game. We didn't. We had a real young team that learned from those mistakes, and then we rattled off 3 straight national titles. You know what I mean? So I was explaining to the guys, if you take the lessons and the things that learn and the things that really suck and hurt right now, and you remember those, that can be a good extra motivation factor that, let's call it what it is, some other teams don't have or won't have right now.
You talked about the continuity within your unit, but just the coaching staff as a whole and kind of having that continuity there as well. How do you think that helps keep that message?
Oh, I think it's huge because everybody, I had a coach tell me one time it usually takes a staff a year to figure out how to work together. You know what I mean? Generally, when a staff comes together, they come from different places, different ideologies. It's understanding and buying into what your head coach wants. And then when you have an offseason like us where we didn't lose any full-time coaches, well, now we have, I think, a better understanding of what Coach Dillingham expects and wants out of us and out of the players, if that makes sense. And again, you don't leave anything to assumption, but at the same time, when you have that, so then you maybe have to spend less time going over those things, and we can go on more time progressing and growing and building. And I think it also allows us to keep our ears open and be more receptive to, when I sit down and talk to Kosanga about the run game and things that he knows and they do, and then I can correlate it to what we do defensively. You're more open to share things and talk about things and kind of learn from each other, if that makes sense. Plus, we're lucky. It's a bunch of really good dudes. Like, I've been on a bunch of staffs, and I've been on staffs where you didn't like people on the staff, you flat out hated people on the staff. Like, we have a staff of guys that really wants to be here and they get along and enjoy each other. You know what I mean? And like you guys, when you enjoy going to work, it makes it a little bit easier. It's a little funner. You know what I mean? A lot, and so I'll hit you with the coach speak. We're just going to have a great spring. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always careful about, especially when you get into stats and accolades, like setting those things, because he could have a really good year and not hit some of those things, and does that mean it's a failure? You know what I mean? And for us on defense and what Coach Ward and Coach Dillingham want to play with 11 men on the field that are playing together and as one, you just got to be careful about saying, hey, we want him to be this or that. I think when you look at the things he needs to get better at, if we accomplish those, then I think you'll see even more individual and hopefully group success out there, if that makes sense.
You said you saw a lot of improvement out of Prayer throughout the past 12 months or so. What have you seen from him specifically?
He's like a different guy. And people got to remember, like, we signed Prayer out of high school, and he was a 3-4 outside backer who rushed most of the time. And his tape was really good. And it's funny, Coach Ward and I were just talking about it. If Prayer had maybe been in a bigger metropolitan area, he might not have walked on here. He probably would have had quite a few more offers. So really just his comfortability in being back off the ball, in his eyes, his vision, the way he studies. Real big credit to Coach Conley, man, because he's really helped boost his confidence. Prayer's had a really good fall and a really good offseason just conditioning-wise. Like, he is one of the more explosive, faster guys in the group. Now, that's now got to translate to the football piece, right? But you've just seen him grow and mature, and I'm excited. It's a big spring for him, so I'm really excited for him.
You mentioned Coach Connolly. How big specifically for your linebacker group has he been to the team?
Oh, huge, because he knows he can push those guys, just kind of like we talked before, that he can push those guys to set the standards and things, and that they're such a good group in handling critique, criticism, and coaching, that if they don't hit it, that he can call those guys out in front of everybody and they can handle it. Does that make sense? So, and so he's done a really good job. And then individually, him and I had a real good talk in early January, individually, on where we felt, not just through spring, but all the way into the fall, physically, where each guy needed to go to be a better version of themselves. So, yeah, he does a great job with those guys. Really good job with those guys.
The success last season, how has Coach Dillingham and staff definitely thought about implementing the steps towards sustaining that success?
Yeah, I think just focusing on getting the guys to understand and focus on it was a process, and that we didn't talk one time last year about winning the championship. Didn't talk about it at all. Even when we got the Big 12 title game, it's like, duh, we already know what game this is, right? So, again, focusing on the process. Focusing on, today we went out and walked through. Hey, the process now after the walkthrough is go hydrate, go get your nutrition in, and then go lift. And then the process after that and treatment. And just focus on the small daily process and focusing on being 1% to 2% better in what we're asking them to do. Where Coach Dillingham's really challenged us is if we're going to ask them to get better at those things, then we can't stay stagnant as coaches as well. We've got to make that same type of improvement.
And is that very similar, or is it different from, obviously you've had success at a very high level on different team. Is it similar to that process on another coaching staff, or is it?
Very, very similar. I worked for Coach Ball, Craig Ball, for 13 years, 14 years. And it was the same way. We didn't talk about winning championships when we were at the FCS level. We didn't talk about winning bowl games when we were at Wyoming. It was all about the process, the daily grind. You know what I mean? Make sure we praise guys when they did things well, correct things when they didn't, if that makes sense. But very kind of staying in the moment. No different than when in the middle of the game and not looking up at a scoreboard, whether you're up 20 or down 20, and just getting the guys to really tunnel in and focus on what we're doing that day. And so very similar for me. You know what I mean? That way going in this offseason, I met with the guys early on, nothing to do with X and O's and everything, understanding, okay, this is how you want to have success again. Well, you got to understand that we got to rebuild the foundation of what we do and who we are. We can't assume anything on the way, because I've made that mistake, and you start assuming, he knows this, or he knows this is what we do, instead of coaching and expecting him to do it. Then you're going to have cracks in your foundation, and those cracks don't usually show up until the season. Well, tell his length, his athleticism, his ability to play in space. You got a guy that was a former high school safety that feels really, sometimes the hardest thing for linebackers moving up to the next level is the amount of space and the athletes they have to play against. Where Tell's very comfortable with that's one of his dominant traits. So for him, it's his evolution is his continued comfort in the box, fitting the run, things like that. Getting a little bit stronger, which he has. I think when you guys see him too, he's got some muscles that are starting to. I told him the other day, I'm like, I don't remember you having biceps and triceps like that last year at this time. So for him, it's just growing. You know what I mean? And he's the type of dude that if we continue to grow and progress him the right way, as you say in recruiting, like that's what you want him to look like when you're recruiting. You know what I mean? And I think we were just fortunate enough to see what a lot of people didn't, because he was playing safety in high school, if that makes sense. Well, Tristan Bacon, who's a local kid, he just won state in wrestling. You know what I mean? We saw him at camp last year very well. Like, I would say both Tristan and Puka are both physically, if you're comparing them to Martell, farther along physically developed. They're stronger. They're probably a little thicker in their frames and their bodies. Where Tell was a little, longer, maybe not his mass wasn't there yet. So those guys are going to come in, I think, being a little stronger. Isaiah's the same way. So now it's just really it's getting them here and it's seeing what they do well and training their eyes to really do all the things we already saw them do in high school. It's kind of just getting them to understand you've already done this. We just got to teach you the terminology and the way we do it, if that makes sense. So I'm excited to get those guys here. They're really fun to be around. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna lie, something was bugging me yesterday, and we ended up meeting yesterday, and like after 5 minutes of the meeting, I'm like smiling and laughing. Like, they have a very good ability to stay focused, but to enjoy the work they're doing. And that's a big credit to Coach Dillingham, because he talks a lot about working harder than anybody, but having more fun doing that. And I would really say those guys embody that. You know what I mean? It's hard to be around those guys And Crook could be serious now. But even then, there's always a smile, there's always a joke, there's always something that it's like we can enjoy the work that we're putting in, even though we're working really hard. Does that make sense? Excuse me. So that's what I really enjoy about those guys. I enjoy because they're committed to being here. They're Sun Devils. They love being here. You know what I mean? They're unselfish guys, yet they're highly competitive. So, yeah, they're a fun group to coach. They're real fun. Zyrus, for sure. Zyrus is right out the gate, probably the number one deal. Crook will too. Don't let Crook fool you. You know what I'm saying? He's always got something slick to say too, but I would say Crook and Zyrus. Where Tate and Key are the more cerebral. You know what I mean? But yeah, Crook and Zyrus for sure.